Hi everyone, today I thought I'd do a quick film about my book in case either you've ordered it, in which case thank you very much, or you're thinking of ordering it, and I just wanted to explain what it's about, what to expect, what's in it. So starting with the cover, these are my post-it notes, so ignore those please. So it's this size, a bit bigger than a head. It's a hardback book with a jacket. If you take the jacket off, you've got the same pictures just without the type, which I actually really love. So the face on the front and some of my vintage makeup on the back. So the first thing to say about the book is that it is not a how-to. Somebody looked at the book the other day and said, oh, where are the how-tos? And it's really not a how-to book. This is a book about the subject of the history of makeup, and it's just a real passion of mine. I know a lot of people expected me to do a how-to book for my first book, and I'm not saying I won't do that in the future, but for me, I really wanted to get all this done. It's almost like it's been such an obsession of mine for years that I've kind of almost scratched an itch by producing this book, and I've kind of got it out of my system in a way, which is good because I was obsessed at one point. So it's another thing to say as well is that it's not chronological. I did this because history is not a linear thing. So when I try to kind of do it more chronologically, there's a lot of repetition and it becomes quite sort of stilted. And I think for me, it was more interesting when it was done in themes. So each chapter has a theme. The first section of the book, the chapters are a little bit more chronological, but from then on, it's very much that you can get different periods of time and you can get things that come up in one theme or one chapter, which then are explored in greater depth under another theme, simply because they kind of fit into two areas, and for that reason you can sort of pick the book up at any point and kind of dip into it, which I think is really nice, rather than having to sit down and say, okay, chapter 1, this is the sort of prehistoric makeup, chapter 2, this is the pre-dynastic Egyptian, sort of so on and so forth. And I just felt it was, for me, more fun like that. So the book is structured in 2 sections. Section 1 is the ancient palette, and that's about just less than a third of the book. And section 2 is entitled The Business of Beauty, and that's about 2/3 of the book. So this is the opener for section 1, the ancient palette. And in the end, I decided to break this into 3 chapters. And each chapter has a colour as its title. So this is red, and this is beauty's most enduring shade. So this charts red, so what the type of red body paint that was used prehistorically, through to red used in ancient Egyptian dynastic times, ancient Greece, Rome, right up until the commercialisation of rouge in the 18th century. And this is an overview of the types of natural ingredients and harmful ingredients and that we use to create red. And there's lots of images. Some are medieval, ancient, Renaissance. We've got Elizabeth I. We've got 18th century French. And there's just lots of stories within that chapter about what was said about women who wore rouge, because obviously there was a lot said about women who wore makeup, and it was all written by men. So that's something that I definitely found quite interesting, particularly in ancient Greece, when men seemed to have an awful lot to say about makeup, constantly critiquing it and satirizing it. So all of that is included in the book. The second chapter is white, and this is the power and the politics of white, and this is really just trying to explain why maybe white was considered attractive for fertility and what was the sort of psychology behind it. Whitening lead, paint, which was obviously very destructive to the skin, the types of ingredients they would have been using, the types of effects in the Far East, in Korea, in China, in ancient Greece, in Rome, and right up really until the 19th century. And then the last chapter in the ancient palette is black, and this is beauty's dark mark, and this deals a lot with eye makeup in ancient Egypt, obviously kohl, and this chapter actually goes right up until modern day. So it's kind of an overview of the ancient world right up until modern day, and it's obviously there's probably 10,000 pages of research, but at the end of the day, it had to be edited down to fit 60,000 words. And if I was to write the entire history of ancient, prehistoric and classical makeup, it would probably be a book that you couldn't even lift off the ground. So I think the hardest part for me was really editing and working with an editor that wanted to cut things out, or getting the structure right. And at the end of the day, I just had to choose the things that I think are the most interesting, and for me are the real keys to the history of makeup. So the ingredients, the stories, a lot of what was said, really helps to kind of form an image in your mind about how it was. So that's the first section, the ancient palette. So the next section is called the business of beauty. And all of the chapters within this deal with how did we get to where we are now. So from a world where there was folklore and charms and recipes that were passed down through generations, or if you were aristocracy or royalty, you would have your apothecary making you up these lotions, potions and poisons, and that's really what cosmetics are all about, to where we are now, living in this world of beauty obsession where you can buy any beauty product anywhere at any time. And the first chapter in this section is called Media and Motivation, Creating the Dream. This is actually my favourite chapter in the book because I enjoy the research so much. And this starts really with the invention of the printing press. It starts with us imagining a world with no imagery around us, so you never got to see what other people look like. And then you've got the printing press and recipes for beauty which were starting to be shared, and then books of secrets as they were called, but mainly all written by men. And then goes to the Renaissance, which is really kind of the birth of beauty culture in a way. With I got access to some amazing research by Jacqueline Spicer at Edinburgh University, who has studied Renaissance beauty, and she has translated the first beauty book ever written by a woman for women, which sounds like, what's the big deal about that? It was actually incredibly rare to find anything about cosmetics and beauty written by women. Another of the things in this chapter is that it really sets the scene for how makeup crossed over from theatrical makeup and actresses to mainstream. And this is really to do with the rising status of actresses, stage actresses, which before the sort of late Victorian time would have been considered, the lowest of the low, or what was euphemistically referred to as women of low morals. But their status really began to rise, and they became the icons of the late Victorian era. And you can see people like Lily Langtry. This is actually a fashion plate that was discussing sort of how makeup was beginning to be portrayed in magazines. And then people like Sarah Bernhardt. I mean, you never ever would have seen an actress, in a newspaper depicted in front of a makeup mirror. She's obviously backstage, but it was becoming respectable, and that's something that I found so interesting. And then you've got the birth of the silent movie industry in Hollywood, which further, added respectability to makeup. And really, it's the first time you're ever seeing the how-tos, in the movie magazines, and you're beginning, women are starting to really want to emulate their favourite actresses, and for that they need makeup and get the looks. And then you've got the birth of advertising of beauty products, and it's such an interesting period, I think, in the kind of evolution of makeup, really from the theatre to the mainstream. One of the things I really enjoyed researching for this chapter was going to the Condé Nast Library and looking through every issue of American, French and British Vogue, looking for that point when makeup truly became a respectable, acceptable thing in the Western world. And it was something that was so covert and so sort of brushed under the carpet. Women were obviously wearing makeup. You could see it in the illustrations, the hand-tinted illustrations of, portraiture, early photography. You could see they were definitely wearing rouge and lipstick, but there was no sort of, you couldn't really mention lipstick. And when it was discussed in the beauty pages, it would be sort of like, for makeup advice, send a stamped address envelope and we will send you the details. So it was very, very kind of undercover. And then I just wanted to go through every issue until I found the exact point, which was different actually in every country. when makeup, it was finally a piece where he said, hey, makeup's fine. You can wear makeup. It's great. We should all wear makeup if we want to. It's a cool thing. And that was actually later than I thought. So it was really interesting. So the next chapter is called History in Your Handbag. And for this, I've really focused on those essential items that we all carry around in our makeup bags and just the stories behind them. So I've chosen to sort of narrow it down to mascara, because I think lots of people have mascara. Then eye palettes, when did eye palettes start? When did they become the thing? Lipstick, obviously, powder and foundation, and blush. So this really just charts the kind of stories behind it. Again, it's not everything about it, because they could probably do with a book each themselves. But it's all the things that I personally find interesting, and I think really create the picture of, when you take something out of your makeup bag in the morning, it just gives you the stories and the background to how that item got there, really. Also in this chapter is the origins of the first brands, and I've kind of traced them back to 5 starting points that I've identified. So it's really just seeing how they came via these different industries and became these global giants. And then for each of the sections, I've done a brief overview about each company, when it started, maybe what it was known for then, what it's known for now, and any interesting stories I was able to dig up from the archives. So the next chapter in this section is called The Bleeding Edge, and this is really about the science. So science and makeup, and how it's been a match made in heaven, and why for some reason makeup has always been sold, or cosmetics have always been sold to women with a sort of scientific angle, which is quite bizarre really if you think about it. And I'm looking at some of the sort of first examples of that and how it's kind of a little bit crazy, like radioactive makeup, which is, believe it or not, quite popular in the 1920s. I have some of that, I own some of that, but fortunately it is, all the pots are empty now, so thank goodness for that. And then really just looking at the technology that we have now, really the biggest sort of leaps and bounds in cosmetic technology have been in the last 20 years. So we're kind of spoiled now. When you go to the department store ever look at makeup, we're really kind of spoiled because we've got amazing technology. So I just sort of describe how that's happened in the last 20 years. So things like silicone, and this is all easy to understand. I'm not getting too kind of techie about it. And things like, really metallic textures that would never have been possible 20 years ago. How we're able to get those now in the products that we use. And I think I want to put this section in because I really want to think about the future of makeup. It's a book about the sort of story and an overview of history, but I love thinking about where it's going 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And I think as passionate and as fascinated as I am with the history, I'm also as passionate and as kind of fascinated by the future of makeup. So I really want to include that in the book. So on to the last chapter, which is actually more of an afterword, and this is I Want to Look Like You. And this is really just discussing ideas of where we are now, in terms of why we wear makeup, the makeup obsessions, exploring sort of the idea of tribal makeup in the modern day. Obviously that's a theme which is explored at the beginning of the book as well because of the ancient palette, but it's something that I'm looking at again at the end and just thinking about, and also looking at feminist theories on makeup and what different great feminist writers have said about makeup. And is makeup, there's a paradox with makeup. Is it a feminist statement, or are we conforming to some sort of male ideal? And I sort of give my views on that. Throughout the book there are quotes by classical philosophers, world famous painters and artists to great writers, but I do choose to end the book on a quote by Miss Piggy, simply because I think this quote really sums up my point of view on that last chapter. There are also makeup muses dotted throughout the book. These are my makeup muses. So these are women that throughout history that I've been inspired by, not just for their makeup, but also their life, or there's something that I find fascinating and interesting about them. And these are very varied. And as I say, they're dotted right throughout the book. So people like Queen Elizabeth, to somebody like, we've got Bianca Jagger there, Meena Kumari, who's a 70s Bollywood star, to Josephine Baker, there she is. And I do have some amazing photography in the book. I have to say the picture research was very painstaking, and I didn't even get some of the images that I really wanted, but I've ended up with the most incredible group of photographs and everything really that I wanted. Not just iconic photography by Avedon and Irving Penn and Matt and Marcus, but it's mixed in with incredible paintings and works of art and sculpture, and the visual quality of this book, I say for the price point, is amazingly good value, I have to say. And it's something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the whole process, and I loved kind of finding the right image to sort of tell the story and kind of go with the words, although it was incredibly frustrating at times because trying to get picture rights that's a whole other story. But it's really been a labour of love, and it's the hardest bit of it was definitely editing all the information down, but I think it's everything that I wanted to say, and I just hope that if you've bought it or you're going to buy it, that you will love it. So take care and see you soon.